how long did it get you to prepare to starting the first one though?
Yeah. So the first one I was training for was Ama de Blanc. And so I continued training for that. And the nice thing about it is like every mountain kind of builds your skills to help you with the next one. So I did harder mountains later, but they didn't feel so hard because I became better. And so we kind of met, right? Like I didn't take on Everest first or K2 first. I built up some skills, learned areas that I wasn't strong, trained those areas so I became stronger, and then tested them in the mountains. And then as I summited mountains, my skill set got stronger and I could conquer more.
When you say that you redefine limits, and it seems like there's no limits for Jen. So when you redefine limit, what is that doesn't mean for you though?
Yeah, I think we all have a comfort zone. And if you're not stretching that comfort zone can get smaller and smaller. And I look back at COVID and you think about when COVID left and people needed to socialize again, nobody was good at it, right? Because we hadn't done it in a while. So we got out of shape with it and it became hard. Where before COVID, that wasn't hard. That was just our everyday routine. And so for when you're taking on these big goals, you're constantly expanding and getting better to lean against that goal, which makes you bigger and the goal smaller, and eventually you get on the same playing field. So for me, if I'm not pushing against that comfort zone, I know it's pushing against me. And so I need to continuously expand that so that what I'm capable of doing gets bigger.
Wow.
Well, this is where the neuroscience comes in really handy, because I have learned the different areas of my brain that I can use in better ways through the neuroscience. For example, I now know that if I take on too much and if there's too much stimulation, the stress curve and the impact on my goal direction, empathy, clarity, memory, all the executive functions from the prefrontal cortex, the more I take on, the more the capabilities will be impaired. So I have learned to stay in this zone of stimulation and stress to not go over the curve where it becomes so much that I can't think clearly anymore. So the neuroscience has really helped me understand my thinking and where it gets to be a challenge and why. And I think that is the incredible benefit of learning how the brain works. Because we suddenly begin to understand why we do the things we do, and why some of the things work and why some of the things don't work, because it is related to neuroscience.
Wow.
And so, so I've learned to not overstimulate myself so that I don't lose, my executive function capabilities. But I've also learned that, I can't keep everything in here. And so, there's another sort of researcher, her name is Annie Murphy Paul. If you get a chance to get her book, The Extended Mind. The Extended Mind, Annie Murphy Paul.
Okay.
It's a very, very good book that helps us understand that in modern times, our brain can't keep that stuff in here anymore. We've just way overextended our capabilities to think clearly. And so the extended mind is the philosophy that we need to offload what's in here into other areas. And so having a to-do list, a vision board, a whiteboard where you can move things around, things that become visual help us offload what's in here in terms of thoughts.
Wow.
And frees up space. So I have learned to offload so that I only keep in here what I need in this moment.
Wow. And that will happen.
So that I don't get distracted about the next thing. And it's like that's offloaded already. The next thing is offloaded. It's already in a file. It's on my calendar. It's on my to-do list, on a sticky note. It's in a reminder. So that's already handled. So my brain doesn't have to hold that now in here while I'm talking to you.
Wow. Thank you so much.
So that book is mind-blowing. It's fabulous. It's extremely well written. Lots of stories, and not sort of so scientific that she'll lose the reader. But I can highly recommend it.
Absolutely. Annie Murphy Paul, right? And the book
Annie Murphy Paul.
And the
yes.
book, The Extended Mind.
The Extended Mind.
I will definitely look forward to that book, and I also look forward to contact her and send your message to her. You were the one who introduced me to the
Yes,
to her
you
works.
can tell her that you can tell her there's a fan club out there in the coaching world that she might not be aware of, and we love her work and her research, and we use it all the time in coaching. So
Wow.
if you get to talk to her, you can say there's a big group of people out there that love your work.
I think what you have to realize is that you have to take action that benefits the organization that you're stewarding. It can't be action that benefits you. And I do believe that is very difficult for most leaders. There are a lot of leaders who will do things because it benefits them personally, right? It furthers their career. It furthers their checkbook. They become richer. But the reality is you can only, and you should only, do things that actually help the organization that you're serving. And that's the same thing with your family, right? You have service to your family, and that's where family legacy comes from. If you look at your family as one that has legacy that you benefit from, the legacy of your parents and your grandparents, and then the legacies that you will pass on to the next generation because you want them to have the opportunities that you've had the benefit of in your life.
Mm. Listen, I have the belief, and I tend to want to hold on this belief that people are good in nature. We are good in principle, and along the way, maybe something that happened along the way that made leaders become more self-centered. It made people a lot, more driven by something that's not, in the benefit of the whole, not benefit for the organizations. So, what happened to those people along the way?
Well, it's interesting because I'm going to talk about something that's a little controversial, which is that I have spent a great deal of time studying Milton Friedman, and I actually am a great believer of Milton Friedman. I had the opportunity to meet him twice and spend time with him. And he points something out, which is that people misunderstand, which is capitalism, right? Our ability to acquire wealth that then benefits other people around us is not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing to become a wealthy person. The question is, how do you manage that wealth yourself within your own life? How do you utilize that wealth in order to create even a greater set of opportunities for other people? And so it doesn't have anything to do with how much you have, but the degree to which you're able to build systems that enable others to be successful in the future.
Couple weeks ago, we had a debatable topic in this region about, and we interesting to hear leaders in here talking about how to switch the mindset, from what is it for me, into what is it, for others, right? And I saw a lot of people, really debating on, if we keep building something for something else, for someone else, then, one day we're coming out empty-handed, and so they really want us to understand what is that. how to answer, how to get the answer on the topic of what is that for me, and then can help them having a fulfilling life, leading others. So for Lisa, what can you give the wisdom and insights first to answer that question?
Well, I think a lot of leaders build monuments to themselves, right? We see
Mm-hmm.
these physical things everywhere, right? You've seen kings in your own country. I've been to your country. I've been all over Asia. They're monuments that people built to themselves. And that then begs the question is, what does that do for anybody else? And so if you look at creating opportunity for others, as opposed to creating a symbolic mechanism for people to remember you after you're gone, I always believe the greatest testament to your legacy is those that you have mentored being successful. And, I saw it with my father. My father was an individual that mentored a lot of people. He built an institution from the ground up. He built an institution that ultimately had millions and billions of dollars in revenue. There are thousands of people employed by the institution, but his legacy is the individuals. His legacy is what did that institution do for the community in which it sat. Even though he was the one who started the institution, he viewed his stewardship of full recognition that it needed to survive after he departed. And that not only that, but the best way for it to survive after he departed was to ensure that the value system that was important to him was passed down and moved forward by those other individuals that would come after him.
My family for generations were entrepreneurs.
Oh.
One of the reasons my grandparents had to come to the United States were they were living in Ukraine, and it was during the Bolshevik takeover of the Russian states, and my grandparents were merchants. They sold things, and they didn't. So they were Jewish merchants, and so they would be killed. So, but even when they came to the United States, they started their own business. And one thing I notice here, there's so many immigrants, and you would know this, that come here. It's difficult to get work, so they start their own business. And I find that the most successful and dedicated and determined, we're going to make this happen, are particularly Asian women. They start their own businesses here in the U.S., and it's just amazing. And so that was in my blood. And my father was an entrepreneur. And when my grandparents came to Arizona, my dad said, "Come here. There's a lot of opportunity." They bought overalls and chickens, and they put fresh eggs in their pockets every day and went door to door selling eggs. So I didn't see the risk in doing that. It was something I knew I always wanted to do.
Oh.
Now, and so that because of that, I knew I wasn't going to stay in corporate life all my life, that I wanted to be on a bigger stage, helping more people than just one company. And I'd had enough of the corporate craziness. So, the hierarchy and all of that. So I really wanted to have the power to create what I wanted to create. So did it take courage? A lot of people said that you're so brave. I didn't see it as bravery. I'd always had a plan. In fact, I told my boss, the day he hired me in my last job, I said, I'm going to be here about 5 years and then I'm going to start my own business and write books. And then the day I resigned, he was shocked. And I said, I told you 5 years ago that I wanted to start my own business and write books. And he says, but I didn't believe you because nobody does that.
Oh my gosh.
And I'm like, you know what? No, I do that. And it's fine that people stay in places that if they're challenged. But again, when I talk about women, my doctoral dissertation was on smart, strong women in the workplace, and they tend to go from job to job and start their own businesses much more frequently than men.
Mm.
You know, because their great drivers are motion. I have to have new challenges. I have to keep learning, and it has to be significant. It has to be meaningful. So what I found with the women, that instead of titles and money, that it was motion and meaning. So even when I have coached, so like I was coaching this woman in China who had reached a very high level in her company, but she was bored to death. And that's what happens with a lot of women. They get very bored. And I said, and she said, I'm tired of the politics here. I just, you know, I don't want to be here anymore. But I have a family. I have to take care of my parents, my kids. And, you know, I make the most money, and everyone says you shouldn't leave. You've got such a good salary and a great position. And I said to her, should. You don't like this job, but you're living by everybody's shoulds. You're living by your friends who tell you not to leave. You're living by, you know, your society. Have you asked your family? And she said, no. I said, well, maybe they would support you. And I said, you've reached this level. And exactly like what you just said to me, could you not find more challenge somewhere else with all your experience? Well, I don't know. You know, shouldn't leave. Well, 2 hours later, after the coaching, she came back to me and said, okay, I got it. I had to sit with it. You're right. I'm living by shoulds instead of what I want. And of course, I can either get a job somewhere else or even start working on creating my own consulting firm. You know, so we live by too many shoulds.
Yeah.
Too many shoulds. I shouldn't do that. I have a family to support. That's what I always hear with the men. I have a family to support. Have you asked your family? Would they support you in doing something else? Usually they say yes, because they don't want to see you burnt out and angry. You know? So look at your shoulds and see how they're getting in the way of your dreams.
Beautiful.
Being open to being wrong, you know, knowing that you're not always, you're very rarely right. And that keeps the curiosity, and being motivated to find out whether you're right or wrong. That's the curiosity. And I think wisdom comes from that constant curiosity to learn and to grow and to keep your brain plastic as it can be, because you know what the developmental neuroscience shows is the brain becomes less plastic with age, but it doesn't become completely inflexible, and that's something that one can control, and by putting oneself in new situations to get out of those, what we call a canalization in developmental neuroscience. Like you're in a rut, basically. How do you get out of the rut? Well, being open to the idea, number one, that maybe you don't know, maybe you can learn something from somebody completely outside of your normal sphere of influence, and being curious to do that, right?
I think for me, it is about staying curious and continuing to seek out new ideas, new information. And that has been by reading, that has been through podcasts, you know, YouTube. There's so many incredible sources now where, you know, when I first moved to Zambia, I thought, oh, I'm in this tiny little country in the middle of Africa. I have access to nothing. That's not true anymore. I have access to the whole world because of the internet and shows like yours and so on. I think for me, it's curiosity, and it's a curiosity about who I am as well, and wanting to delve deeper and peel off more layers of that onion. And then, of course, use that information to help others. So to continue to help myself think, it's about being curious, about questioning things and learning more, broadening my own perspective, realizing that if I only know this, I'm in my little box here. The more I know, the more I expose myself, the more the wider my perception can be.
Beautiful. Karen, for you and David, you help people to get wiser. You help leaders to be to lead the team better and be better leaders, right? What kind of question do you ask yourself every day?
One of the questions we literally ask ourselves, not even just every day, but like 12 times a day, is what is most important right now. And we teach in our leadership programs, we call it the MIT, the most important thing, and we teach people to think in terms of a pyramid. So what is most important at the strategic level? Like, what are the 2 or 3 big things you're working on as an organization? What are the most important initiatives under that? What are the most important activities? And then, very importantly, what are the most important habits that, if you do them consistently, will make the biggest difference? And to understand, grounding yourself in that. So, obviously running a leadership development company, one of the most important things is our client experience. Do people come and have a unique, best-in-class experience learning something that they're going to apply, right? Because that's our mission, that they're going to go be able to do something. So that is a most important thing. Being a thought leader in the world is a most important thing for us. It's important that we don't phone it. We don't use ChatGPT to write blog posts for us, right? We are doing our original research. We're sharing our experiences. We're writing. Like, all of these things are most important things, but they all run down to a habit level. But in any given moment, you have to have a laser focus on what's the most important thing. So yesterday, for example, we had a cyber attack hitting our website. Oh. Now, our website is everything for us, right? We've got 1,500 articles. We have universities that depend on our articles. We have clients that depend on our articles. It's our marketing. It is a big problem when, like, 5 minutes before I get a call, a university calls us and says, we've just blocked your site. Okay, this is not good. But also, I went in and David and I were both about to get on an executive leadership development program virtually with our largest client. Wisdom looks like this is a big problem. Like, we quickly got, made the phone calls. We needed to get some people working on the thing. But then when we showed up in that meeting, just focused on the most important thing, those executives in the room. It wouldn't have done any good to show up frantic and like spewing, oh my God, we're so worried about this thing, blah, blah, blah. That wouldn't serve them. So how do, the wisdom to say, okay, I did what I could do. Now for the next 75 minutes, I got to focus on doing the best I can for these leaders. And then I'll go back to deal with this problem. And I think that is one way. And I'm not sure, that's hard to do when when your brain is like, what am I going to do, right? But, how do you just show up and say, there's nothing I can do right now in this moment except this thing, which is be present for these leaders. Right.
Wow.
It's not our workload that's killing us. It's our thought load. And so I've coined this new term, thought load, and it's an equation. 2 things on the top and 1 on the bottom. So let me tell you what they are. First, the heavy, heavy cognitive load we're under because of how much we're trying to pay attention to and how distracted we are and how many hours of meetings and how many news articles, our brains are saturated. That's too much flour. That's the one challenge. The second challenge, the emotional baggage we are trying to walk around the workplace with. Our society is emotionally dysregulated. People are anxious. People are angry. People are hostile. We're seeing it everywhere, and it comes into the workplace. People are taking everything personally. They are in the drama and triggered. So we're trying to cope with all of that. But the load part is that we're trying to cope with all of it as our energy reserves get lower and lower. We're not sleeping well. We're not eating well. We're really exhausted. We're burned out. And so the weight and the burden of the cognitive load and the emotional baggage is even heavier. And so the fun of the book is realizing that we've got great books about focus and great books about emotions and great books about resilience, but I don't think we have anything that's helping managers understand that this is a system where each one of these problems today is amplifying the others. So as our energy goes down, one of the things we know is one of the first things to go is our ability to calibrate what to pay attention to and what not to. So as our energy goes down, that cognitive load goes up. As our energy goes down, our likelihood of experiencing something as emotional or threatening or, he's out to get me goes up. As our anxiety goes up, we tend to try and multitask as a way of dealing with that heavy cognitive load. But we know one of the biggest outcomes of multitasking is increased anxiety and reduced energy. So the new book is a formula for managers for how they can first get their own thought load down. And then how do you lead a team in a way where the most important thing you're doing is managing people's thought load so that these smart, accountable, awesome people can actually do the job they're there to do. But right now, I think managers are contributing to people having an extremely high thought load. It's why we're really not getting as much done. It's why productivity numbers in our economy are terrible. They're not good at all. So we feel like we're doing way too much work. And I would say we're not accomplishing very much work at all. We're doing too many things. We're worrying about too many things. But very little of that energy is actually going into creating outputs and outcomes that affect the world. So that's the recipe in the new book. I'm just finishing the first draft right now, but it takes a long time before a book hits bookshelves. But I'll be sprinkling these ideas everywhere. If you subscribe to my newsletter at leannedavy.com, there'll be lots of information, little drips and jabs and ideas. All year I'm doing my articles and my blogs, and my YouTube channel is all of these ideas leading up to the book. So there's lots for people to learn. You don't have to wait for the book to get some of these tips.
Okay, so assuming that we're gonna travel time and travel space also to another universe where you and I, me now, be able to see your your mom's father and your father's mother. So with the four of us together, all right.
Yeah.
And Michelle gonna share one piece of wisdom that Michelle's been having back to your grandparents. All right. So what is that piece of wisdom you are going to and proudly saying to them?
Oh gosh, that's a great one. I'm going to share something that is applicable in life and career, and it is something that I share with my career transition clients, but this is so applicable in life in general, which is this is not your forever place. Ever. Like if you're experiencing a challenge or you're experiencing a struggle, that struggle is an event. That struggle doesn't last our whole lives. So whether the struggle is losing a job, maybe having a problem with the house and not sure if you can keep your house, or, maybe the falling apart of a relationship, or any of those kind of things, like this is not your forever place. Like things will turn around, and things will evolve, and they will grow, and they will become better from here. It can feel very stressful in the moment, but it's not going to be how it always will be. So I think that's something that I've learned. I have learned that through life, with different situations and different challenges. And that would be one thing that I would share. I've seen it help so much, and I've seen the truth of it so much too.
Wow. And I hope that this message, that piece of wisdom, will reach to many, many people during this challenging time in their lives, right? So that it can give them hope, and it can give them the courage to continue to face with setbacks and challenges. So on their journey, they'll be able to find peace and joy. So you guys are expert in perception. You wrote a book together on perception. So we want to know, what is your definition of perception first?
Well, there's so many definitions that we gave in the book, but that's basically everything you see, everything you view, you interact, different life circumstances you go through, and what do you feel once that's happening? How do you perceive the reality? How do you perceive the world? So we started with a core question: is there such a thing as reality? And Greek philosophers, I went down that rabbit hole. She did tell me, you go there on your own, because we were doing different chapters. And all of a sudden I called her one day and I said, listen, I don't even know if there is such a thing as a reality. She's like, we're never going to finish this book. So then we agreed on the concept of business reality. Because the reason why I said what I said was, putting Greek philosophers and their research aside, you and I can go into a restaurant and we can sit together and we can have a couple fighting next to us. And we can walk away and then share that story with our other friends. We will focus on something differently. We may have some similarities, but some vast differences in what we perceived. I may say that my perception is that that lady is being abused. Your perception may be that this gentleman lost his cool because she was talking to, or whatever. I don't want to generalize. Whatever the case may be, and there's different research that was being done when they talk about the testimonies in court. And why the eyewitness testimonies are not reliable. Why is nowadays every single jury in the world wants to see forensic evidence, wants to see science? Well, it is for the reason. Because 7 different individuals looking at the crime may perceive something vastly differently. So the definition of what's perception, you go to the core definition of what's reality. Perception is we're processing the universe, and basically what we're doing is there's several different variables that we focused on that we're studying. It is life experiences, it is gender, cultural upbringing, culture, your native culture or the culture that you live in. Some of us are bicultural, multicultural. Then we talked about emotional intelligence. We're talking about pure intelligence. We're talking about the curiosity index. So we were talking about so many different things. And ultimately, going back to my original story, it's not scientifically proven, but it was determined as we were putting all this research together that my upbringing, my life circumstances prepared me for the worst versus Diane being more optimistic in life. So what I've heard the keywords that were triggering something in me, such as, in that meeting they said there will be a drastic change. To me, in my life, change is, you know how in the United States they always say, oh, change is good, embrace change. In my life, change sometimes was you lose your home, you lose your family. You are all of a sudden in this camp, and you don't have what I'm trying to say is like change for me, the word change was not good. And then also they said some of you may not like the change. So may not like the change. Again, she's hearing more responsibilities. I'm hearing we're losing our jobs. So we went, it boiled down in our case, it wasn't gender, it wasn't intelligence, it wasn't emotional intelligence, it wasn't all these different things that I talked about. In our case, it was the some semi-cultural, but a lot of it was experience, life experience and upbringing. And that's, you bring yourself to the table, no matter the setting. You bring your bags. When people say, I love when here, especially in the Western Hemisphere, you hear, oh, it's nothing personal, it's just business.
Yeah.
I always say, it is always personal.
It is, yeah.
When you're saying that, you're dismissing everything that you bring to the table. For example, you and I are talking. I am trying to project something, because we were talking about the perception index and we were talking about the process that we go through. I am trying to convey my message to you and to your listeners, to your audience, to the best of my abilities. I am hoping that you're not only understanding the message, but that you're receiving it the way I'm intending it. I am counting on your understanding of the topic, on your emotional intelligence, on your critical thinking, to be able to receive my message in the way it was intended. A lot of times we talked about the global leadership in our book, and we talk about how this perception impacts global leadership. As I was doing research in many different countries, I noticed that one thing works for me best is to spend some time observing first. As much as I'm talking tonight, because we have to talk, it's a show, right? I'm very comfortable just spending some time observing. Because once you observe, you learn. And a lot of times when people have a misunderstanding, very rarely people have ill intentions to offend. Sometimes it's just a simple misunderstanding, and it is based on what I'm thinking I'm projecting, what I'm trying to project, and what you're receiving.
You may take it as me turning it on its head, but it is listening to younger people, because they see things differently, and they see things differently for a reason. And I think that sometimes the older generations don't pay enough attention to why it seemed differently, and seeing word differently, how can we move forward faster? How can we move forward with more grace, perhaps? And then, to your point, never, ever, ever dismiss the wisdom of our seniors. You laugh, but I remember my grandpa and grandma, I told you, on the farm. To this day, I know what herbs to use for healing certain things. Just because they told me. They don't teach you that at school, right? And that's, and it's not just the wisdom of curing something when you're in a field. It's the wisdom of appreciating and respecting the wisdom of our elders.
Wow.
And I think that's very important.
Beautiful. How do you define wisdom in your own words?
I think for me, it starts with curiosity. It's an openness to be exposed to different ideas and knowledge and experiences. because with that, you gain reflection and you learn and you grow and your world gets so much bigger. And I find those that are maybe lacking some wisdom, aren't quite open, aren't experiencing that curiosity and the ability to explore different things. So to me, that's the heart of it, this curiousness for the world around us and the people in it.
Okay, so it start from curiosity. Okay,
Yeah.
it can start from anything, any area, any other things, but then you chose curiosity. We want to dive in deeper to that. Why did you decided to put curiosity as a core for defining wisdom in your life?
I find if I think about in all of my years in work settings, the best moments happen when people were curious and they were open, right? Curiosity leads to growth mindset. It leads to communication and collaboration. And the moments when people aren't curious are when the problems arise, and the times when we haven't slept and we're hungry and all of those other things have happened, we're not as curious. And so I think that this willingness to just be open to explore and experience is a critical gateway to wisdom.
I think the most impactful small thing leaders can do right now, they can start today, they can start right now, the minute they're done listening to this episode, is to go thank someone, go recognize their contributions, right? It is one of the most underutilized tools we have. And research shows that a simple thank you from a manager once a week is enough to reduce burnout and disengagement, cut them in half. And that 40% of people, only 40% of people, so only 4 in 10 people feel like they are recognized appropriately or they're thanked often enough for the work that they do. And so if there's one thing you can do right now is pause and think about what specific contribution did that person have, and go tell them. And sometimes people, sometimes leaders don't do that because either they assume the person knows, or because there's like a little bit of awkwardness involved in expressing gratitude. But research also shows that, people never regret expressing gratitude, and that this behavior can be contagious. And so not only are you thanking and recognizing someone, it's going to make them feel great, but what usually happens is that they then start noticing and recognizing and thanking people for their contributions. And so it creates kind of a positive upward spiral that can be so, so meaningful.
Beautiful, beautiful.
Well, you're talking about just a relationship, not marriage, just
I mean marriage, yes.
Marriage, okay, marriage. Okay, yes, once you're married, to know that God hates divorce. And so he gives condition for divorce if there's adultery that happens. Otherwise, he wants people to stay together. Of course, I would think, if you're beat up and abused, there's certainly that situation too. But the Lord can heal it. He can heal it. I felt like we were totally different people. We should never have been married. That I was a very certain person this way, and he was a certain person that way, and it was just opposites. And somehow opposite seems to attract. And I think it helps to mold us a little bit better, so we get a little bit more in the middle. But just forgiveness really is a very, very important thing. To forgive when you're going to hurt each other, you're going to have times that are bad. To forgive and then commit yourself to love, and to realize that Jesus is the one that will be the perfect one. Jesus is the one that will love you all the time, no matter what. He'll love you. He'll forgive you. Your husband might not forgive you, but He will. The Lord will. And so just if your husband doesn't know the Lord and you do what the Lord wants you to do.
Wow.
And follow that. You don't have to try to shake them up and do anything like that. You just love them and let God take care of them. But you do what God wants you to do. And the first thing you need to do is turn your life over to the Lord and just say that you believe that Jesus did die for you on the cross. He is God incarnate, and He's with the Father in heaven. How to explain the Trinity, nobody's been able to really explain that well. Yeah. I've heard it said with water can be ice, water can be steam, and water can be physical. So yeah, it could be, you could look at it like that. But anyway, there are three parts to the one God. Wow. It's one God. but turn your life over. But it has to be through Jesus. Yeah. And the Bible is very clear saying that there's no other name by which you can be saved. Only way to God is through Jesus. He's the way, the truth, the life. And so that's the only way. It has to be Jesus. And the Lord made that very clear to me. I had some sects come and visit me after that. And the Lord said, no, on the Bible, Jesus, that's who the one is that you're following, and that's who you stay with. And because there can be sects that are wrong. And by sects, I mean people that don't believe Jesus is God. That's really the criteria. Because there's certain people that might call themselves Christians, like Mormons. But they believe Jesus is a God, not the God. Yeah. Wow. So there's a difference there. So just turn your life over to Him and just walk with Him as close as you can.
How have you been improving your ability to think over the years?
Oh, it's an interesting question. You just do a lot of thinking, and I think you get exposed to a lot of ideas. And what I like about, the way I like to look at the ideas is not just the ideas themselves, but also the process by which this kind of dialectic, if you're familiar with that word, the critical thinking, the dialectic, it's not just one way of thinking about the world, but it's kind of the clash of ideas. And it comes from first of all, you already by definition speaking several languages. It really shapes your brain that way, as you probably relate to that, because the way you think about, like in your particular case, you think in Vietnamese and you think in English, and you can see that these are not overlapping systems. There are lots of opportunities. So for people who speak several languages, and lived in different cultures, I think that's kind of an analog way of experiencing this diversity of ideas, diversity of concepts, diversity of tools. I'm not a polyglot, but I speak several other languages, and I'm kind of working on my Spanish. It's really interesting, even though I don't have the time, but I have online, I have a coach or a teacher who I meet regularly and talk to her in Spanish.
Beautiful. And we talk about the book already. We talk about your practice thinking already. So we want to ask a little bit about the future. So is there anything that exciting you are working on, you want to share with us so that we can congratulate and celebrate with you in advance?
Yes, that's really interesting. I think I'm taking this conversation on the road. I shared with you that I will be in Japan, doing a series of talks in Tokyo to business leaders and different professional communities. I will be at a big conference in Singapore. It will be a 3-day HR conference. And in June, we're doing a big coaching and technology conference in Berlin, Germany. inviting Europeans to come to our conversation about what it means in the context of their cultures and in the context of their economies.
I remember, I can picture the scene so perfectly. I was in my bedroom at this house that I rented. The walls were this raspberry pink color. I was lying on the hardwood floor feeling so sorry for myself and thinking, what have I done? I'm such an idiot. And then I thought, this is not helping the problem. Me sitting here crying is not going to change anything. And I could give up. But I really believed in what I was doing, and I've had so many conversations with people who really liked my idea. I just needed them to take action and sign up now. I needed to kind of put some pressure on. And so I just thought, I can't give up. I've spent the last 5 months working so hard to get this started. I can't give up right now. And so I just decided to stop crying. And, I've always been told I'm a never give up kind of girl. If I really believe in something, it's just not my nature to be a quitter. I will find a way if I really believe in something. My team will often laugh at me, and they say one of my superpowers, I guess, is when someone puts up a hurdle or a wall, I find a way around it or through it. I'm not. If I really believe in something, I'm just not going to give up that easily, so.
How have you been growing your thinking?
There's many ways that I continue to grow my thinking. So first and foremost, I'm a lifelong learner. If I could go back to school today, I would. And study, lots of things that I'm so curious about. So I think the primary way that I grow my thinking is to continue to be learning and reading and talking with people and asking questions. And, I'm so fortunate to be part of a couple of professional groups that allow me to do that with some amazing colleagues. One of those is the Marshall Goldsmith 100 Coaches, which is where, I get to learn and share and grow and evolve with, the amazing, counterparts in that organization. Another is the Recognized Expert Group that Dory Clark founded. I have some amazing colleagues there who, we, get to talk about and learn from and share, on a variety of topics, not just leadership. And I think that brings me to my second point, which is, the more that I can continue to learn and grow my knowledge in different areas, the more it helps me think differently about leadership and continue to inform my thinking so that it gives me a different way to look at it. So I continue to, for example, I continue to learn ballroom dance and I continue to compete in ballroom dance, which gives me another way of, looking at leadership, right? I continue to travel so that I'm continually exposed to new things and different things. And I'm looking at what I know as normal through a different lens, which gives me a way to think about it. And I think, just surrounding myself with people who challenge me with amazing questions like you just asked, also help me grow and continue to push that thinking. And that is, as hopefully a thought leader in this space of leadership going forward, that is what I hope to still bring to this space, a different way to think about this and a different way for people to think about their actions and their behaviors and their beliefs and how those are shaped to create how they show up in the world.
Beautiful. And thanks for sharing.
It was in the early days of my new life as a consultant, and my boss at that point in time, he told me, you know, if you want to be credible in interaction with the clients, don't feel afraid of smiling, he told me. So you don't have, you know, to be serious to look credible, first of all. So you can be your true self. So if you want to smile, please do smile. Because obviously he saw me, let's say, in the office, and in the office it was Elisa smiling, but then in the client setting, I was becoming, you know, much more formal and serious. And so the first recommendation was, Elisa, please remember that you can be your true self, obviously. And he suggested, you know, to just write on a post-it, on a small post-it, and glue it on my laptop screen. Remember to smile, especially during the video conferencing meetings, especially at the beginning, again, because I was very, very nervous. So if I completely forgot that, you know, the way in which I was interacting with people, my body language was indirectly having a negative influence on others, you know, because the very moment that you look tense, that you look nervous, people will absorb like a sponge all your feelings. And so, again, probably may sound, you know, too simplistic, but sometimes just having, let's say, a small yellow post-it close to your laptop, remembering you to smile more, or let's say to inject some humor into the conversation. But the same is valid also for other suggestion or a piece of advice that they give as a coach to junior consultants, especially when they are female. For instance, female tend to say sorry, oh, apologies, sorry, I'm late, sorry, I'm here, sorry, I'm there. And so my suggestion is always, please write on a post-it, stop saying I'm sorry. So at least, you know, the artifact, the small artifact will help you remember, you know, the do's and don'ts. And I think that this is valid also when it comes to humor. So people who probably are not, let's say, natural, ironic people, okay, having a small post-it. And it's also important to give candid feedback to other colleagues, and don't be afraid, you know, to do a pat to your colleagues, say, oh, well done the presentation, but next time, please, smile a bit more, you know, you look too serious. Yeah. And so it's a mix of things. I think it's seeking and gathering feedback, is using artifacts to remind you, you know, the do's and don'ts. And then, you know, keep telling to yourself, especially in my work, that I'm not saving lives. At least that's not my job. I try to do the best to have a small, meaningful impact. There are good days and bad days, but in the end, you want other people to feel good at work, to feel good at interacting with you. So put a smile on your face and try to have an impact on their lives.
Yeah.
I would say my ability to think, to get out of my head. Sometimes it's going for a walk. Sometimes it's journaling. Sometimes it's reading and taking the time to reflect on what I've learned, what I would like to share with someone else. But it really is creating that space. And I can remember there was a LinkedIn Live Whitney Johnson did during COVID, and I am a huge fan of her work. I will openly admit it. And she was talking about, you know, how sometimes we get caught in the scrolling, where we're overwhelmed, and so when we find ourselves getting caught in scrolling, what is the activity we can use to shift us? What does that look like? And so, often when I find myself, and I find that's happening for me when I'm overwhelmed, when I'm feeling tired. So I find actually I'm not a gifted pianist, but I can play the piano. I can only play it for short periods of time, but I find just the simple movement of getting in front of the keyboard, looking at what I can play. Sometimes I have to use the circle of fifths because I'm missing my mobility in my right hand isn't that great. But it's shifting your activity. If you find you're getting caught in something that's you're not connecting with yourself, how can you create that connection? Maybe it's walking on the grass, like just walking, getting away. And I think the technology in a lot of cases is impeding our ability to think. So what is the way for each of us to connect with ourselves? Maybe that's a reflection. Maybe that is going for a walk. Maybe that is coloring. Adult coloring books, I think everyone should have. They're a beautiful thing to do. Maybe it's creating a vision board. Maybe it is listening to a podcast. Maybe I think the opportunities are endless. Maybe it's getting out your favorite cookbook and making a recipe that you're going to share with your friends, or make that recipe, invite a friend over for tea or coffee, or take it into work to share with your colleagues.
When I think about the people in my life who have been most influential and inspiring, what was true about those relationships was it was this combination of support and challenge. And the support is like that ability to honor what is, like what you are today and everything that you bring with you, and to see the potential, like this limitless potential, and give you the confidence and like the awareness of what that is, and then challenge you to actually attain it, like to keep getting a little bit better every day. And it's this like duality of like you're a masterpiece and a work in progress at the same time, and how do you like harness and support that in someone. And so for me, it's about like that being my view of myself, is trying to, I'm a recovering perfectionist, but I think like where I am now, it's like, I think giving myself grace and compassion in all my failings, but also trying to, take time to appreciate what I have been able to accomplish, and saying like, what's next? How do I get like 1% better every day?